7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You'll never have the sacred stone.
Oh, this you crazy mother.
Welcome to Innovating a Game Changer podcast. I'm your innovator, Nevarda Smith, and today we're going to look at Checkmarx and the value of shifting to the left the application security testing, what it means to your bottom line for your company, and what it means to your developers. This is your innovator, Nevarda Smith, and you're listening to the Innovating a Game Changer podcast. Okay, welcome back to Innovating a Game Changer podcast. I'm Nevarda Smith, and I'm here to bring you innovation tips, tricks, and application processes that are going to help you and your company move into an innovation approach away from waterfall, away from simple agile, into a place that's getting customer value out to the customer. And how do we do that? We've got to start investing in the application architectures that allow us to do application development rapidly and push stuff out to the customer so that we can get that customer feedback and determine whether we're on the right value or not. So one of the tool sets that are absolutely critical in doing that is a tool set from Checkmarx or one of the other providers that are out there. And what they do for you is start to automate a lot of the DevOps processes. In particular, application security testing applications are typically done at the end of the cycle after development has been completed. So if we take a look at this graphic here, during design and build stages, and again, this is typically a typical waterfall approach, and this tool is instrumentally valuable during waterfall because of the way waterfall works. Now, also, you can use this with a SAFe 4.5, an agile framework where you're doing things every 2 weeks. Again, the feature sets apply in the same way that I'll be discussing about here. But as you can see, by the time you get down to the end of testing and deployment, which is really when I would typically, during a waterfall approach back in the day, engage the security application testing team to come in and run their security scans. They would give us a list of bugs as long as my arm, or a list of vulnerabilities as long as my arm, with a severity level, and then I would have to either address those things immediately before we go to deploy into production, or I would get a waiver on some of those things that are lower vulnerabilities and of less possibility of impacting our post breach. You would get breach after you're in production. So if we take a look at a SAFe 4.5, an iteration that's lasting 2 weeks, we're really doing design, build, and testing all in that 2 weeks. We're working on that stuff. Now, as a developer checks this code in, they know what they've been working on during that 2 week period. Hopefully they're checking in on a daily basis, if not every other day. And at that point, the security scan's going to run. Those vulnerabilities are going to come back to that developer. That developer's going to be able to address them immediately. Within 10 or 15 minutes of him actually checking his code in, all the automation's going to run. That would include the security testing as well as other types of automation, such as test automation, unit test automation, and all of that feedback's coming back to that developer. He can address that immediately. He's learning through that cycle. The system is giving him that feedback to improve his skill sets and make sure what he's doing is absolutely correct. Now, if we take a look at a normal waterfall approach here, by the time these security breaches or these application security tests have been run and the vulnerabilities are back to the user, you're going to see here that the guy has to figure out exactly what he was working on back in the day. Now, in my experience during waterfall 5-6 years ago, typically what would happen was I would get those vulnerabilities that would come back to me, and I'd give them to my best developers to deal with the high priorities, the ones that are going to stop us going to production, to deal with those directly themselves. So those entry-level developers or those mid-career developers really weren't getting the exposure to these security tests to feedback, and then what would happen would be they'd keep making the same mistakes over and over again, and of course the cost of that would continue to go up, and those guys aren't learning anything as we go through. If we take a look at the next graphic in here, which is important, is how many people are actually being involved? So what is the resource ROI of investing in these types of tools, these application security tools during check-in process? Well, if you catch it down in the developer and the DevOps during the design and build stages, then I'm talking really more on the developer side. A developer coded something, thinks he's finished with it, he did his local testing, he's ready to go, he checks it in. Now, within 10 or 15 minutes, the build automation, the DevOps is kicking off these security tests, these security vulnerability checks, and what's coming back is a list of those things that he can now address immediately. Now, he's engaged at this point. He can go and talk to other developers on the team to see how he can fix those, but the most important thing is, after 1 or 2 cycles of that, now he's going to be thinking about those things he's had to fix in the past, and he's going to be addressing those in the initial development rather than later on, or not even getting exposure to his mistakes down during the development cycle. As we move towards the left, you can see that we're starting to involve DevOps, security teams, QA now. They've all been involved. Any changes to code have got to go through the QA cycle again, so it's adding to the cost. By the time you get to deployment, you've got managers, project managers, now legal's getting involved, developers, DevOps, security teams, QA. So you can understand that the cost is just increasing at this point. And if you do end up with a breach because of something that was done below, obviously legal and marketing and support, you're going to have to deal with all sorts of things about how do you message the breach to the market. You can read the papers today, or you can go out into the internet and do a search for some of the largest breaches that happen. And these breaches impact the bottom lines of the company, not only in the current quarter, but going on for many, many years as they continue to provide security monitoring of the an individual or a customer's information, and that costs the company money, and that's an ongoing cost that really should never go away until the customer feels comfortable that their data wasn't actually sold. So it's very, very important to make sure that you're not putting possible breaches into production, and dealing with it at the developer level is much better than dealing with it at the post-breach cycle here. Lastly, this graphic here kind of shows it as well. I'll just move it up a little bit. The cost of remediation by the time you get into production. Now, these numbers themselves, I'm not sure if I agree with them. Let's say it's an average cost of $60 an hour for a developer across your whole team, then an hour and a half to deal with a security vulnerability during a check-in process is probably fairly accurate. Once you get to build, it's $240, $940. I think it gets higher during testing, because if you really think about the cost here, even at a $60 an hour average, the cost has gone from 1.5 hours at this point to upwards of 15 or 20 hours, because you've had developers involved, multi-developers involved, security analysts involved, and QA cycles and all the rest of it. All the team members are being involved now and impacted, and then you've got to go through those cycles again if you're in a waterfall approach. So again, it's all about getting that automation into it. So this has really been a brief overview of these white papers from Checkmarx. These things are really good. I'm going to be bringing you a full series on these tools. Go out to the Checkmarx site, take a look at the white papers that they've got out on here. Hey, also, I wanted to mention that I really appreciate your time here. I really appreciate you sharing my content. Please give it to other people. If you've got any comments, please leave them below. I read all those comments. If you've got ideas for future shows, please leave them below as well. I'm hoping to gather a set of questions. I'm going to do a Q&A around the DevOps space and also on the automation space, along with innovation topics. So if you're struggling getting your enterprise to move across to innovation, please send those comments below, because I'll actually get to answer those. So again, you've been listening to Innovating a Game Changer podcast. This has been a podcast on the white papers from Checkmarx, specifically around the ROI of Shifting Left.